I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hill String Gang, or Angola 3. I'm here for life, I'm here to die. Inside these walls, inside the wire. And when the wolf cries, I know it's over. Oh, bloody Angola. Oh, bloody Angola.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bloody Angola, a podcast 142 years in the making, the complete story of America's bloodiest prison. I'm Jim Chapman. Woody Overton is not with us today. He is visiting his granddaughter in California. So I dropped an episode just a few days ago, and I'm dropping another one this week. You know, you give me the keys to the vet, you better look out. I'm going to bring you something a little bit different, something that may surprise you, but a really interesting story nonetheless, and it involves me. And I'm going to tell you a story, and we're going to call this Mistaken Identity. So I'm going to take you back, and I guess this was 1993 or 4. I was 18 and I just graduated from high school, you know, moving on in life, looking at working in the summer times, going to school in the fall, and really hustling at that time, but dumb as a box of rocks at 18, like we all are, right? At this point, I was living in an apartment with 3 other guys, and we're all going to go to school and do all these things. We wanted to get out of our houses, right, and live with our parents. We didn't want to do that no more. So we had a 2-bedroom apartment with 4 dudes living in it, and it was fun as hell back in those days when I think back at it. But I think rent back then was, it might have been $500-$600 for a 2-bedroom. And so we were all paying like $100 a month for rent. I remember we would take hamburger meat and just make 50 hamburgers at one time in the broiler. And that's what we'd eat. You know how it was back in those days. And, didn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out, right? Going about life. And at that time, I drove a 1978 Chevette, and it was a POS, but it got me where I needed to go, and I was happy to have that. So I'm cruising to work. I see a bunch of cars stopped in front of me ahead on the road. They're checking inspection stickers. And in Louisiana, I know it isn't like this everywhere. And really, even in Louisiana now, you don't have to have inspection stickers everywhere anymore. But at this time, you did. And they're checking for inspection stickers and pulling people over so they can get that quota, right? And guess what? I didn't have an inspection sticker. I mean, that costs money. And I was 18 years old and didn't have that. So I get pulled over. Guy points at me. He sees I don't have an inspection sticker as I'm going through this checkpoint. The cop pulls me over, asks for my license, tells me, you don't have an inspection sticker. Yeah, I know that. So he takes my license, leaves, and he comes back and he says, you had a ticket you didn't pay, and there's a warrant out for your ticket. It was like a speeding ticket or something. And this is 30 years ago, y'all. So I guess probably I did have one that maybe slipped through the cracks, or maybe didn't slip through the cracks, but I just didn't pay it, or I forgot to get a cord or whatever for this speeding ticket. So he says, we're going to have to have you step out of the car. And I said, you're serious? And he's like, well, yeah, we're not going to write you another summons to go to court, and you don't even go the first time. You know, he was rightfully being a dick. And so I get out of the car, and he goes through the whole thing. Put your hands behind your back, frisk me, reads me my rights and all that stuff, and off to jail. They take me, and it wasn't really jail. It was the courthouse. And there was in the East Baton Rouge Parish courthouse, they have like a holding area, I guess you'd call it. And it's got some cells in it. And they take me there, and I get there. There's two other guys there. And it wasn't bloody Angola, right? You go and you're sitting there, and I'm thinking, okay, what's next? Because the guy didn't say anything to me the whole time. I'm in my mind kind of freaking out, kind of in shock. I was on my way to work, and this is before people had cell phones and stuff, really. I mean, cell phones existed, but you had to be a multimillionaire to have one. It wasn't like I could just call somebody or text somebody and say, hey, I'm being brought to the courthouse. So I get there, and they're kind of explaining things to me, and they say, you have to sit here, and you're going to see a judge, and you can either pay it then, or they'll determine what to do with you. In total shock of this. And then, interestingly enough, the jailer comes down to the cells, and he has a McDonald's bag, and he's giving us cheeseburgers. And look, y'all, my mind was so not realizing how much trouble I was actually in that the whole thing I was thinking was cool. I get 2 free cheeseburgers. He was giving cheeseburgers to everybody. And that was like lunch, right? And I don't know how much time passed, but it was definitely hours. And the guy comes back down, and he said, you can go see the judge or whatever. And I'm struggling to even remember, y'all, the details of how this happened, but I ended up having a bail, like to get out, and then I would have to go to court on this ticket, and there might have been another charge tacked onto it because I didn't pay the ticket. It's very fuzzy to me, this part, but I ended up getting a bail, and it was high. It was like $5,000. So there was something on there, and I don't remember for the life of me what it was. But I was able to get a phone call, called my friend, my best friend at that time. And I kind of told him the scenario as quick as possible because they were only giving me so much time. And I said, you need to come bail me out of jail. He said, well, how much is your bail? And I said, it was like $5,000. And if you know how bail works, you don't pay the whole $5,000. You pay like 20% of that or something. Maybe even less than that. And so I told him, I'll pay you pay my bail. And then when I get out of here, I'm going to pay you back. And then I'm going to get all this straight. So my friend comes down like good friends do, and he pays the bail, but he doesn't know how bail works. So he doesn't call a bail bondsman. He pays the whole $5,000 cash. Which I don't have $5,000 to give him back, right? Just crazy. Awesome friend, but just crazy that he was willing to do that. What a guy. And so they come to the cells. They say, hey, your friend's here. He bailed you out. Great. I jump up, run to that cell door. They pop the door. The jailer brings me to this room, gives me my personal property back, and I start to leave. And as soon as I turn around to leave, they stop me. Hey, as a matter of fact, one of the jailers said to the other one, and I'm calling them jailers. I don't know what you would call it, bailiffs or whatever you call these guys. But one says to the other one, stop him. Don't let him out. And he grabs me as soon as he says that. And he says, come on, you got to come back. Something's wrong. And I'm like, oh, shit. So I go back and he says, you have another warrant. You have a whole warrant. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And he said, you've got a warrant out for your arrest for theft, felony theft. And I'm thinking, for whatever reason, they're fucking with me. And I start laughing, and I'm like, and he ain't laughing back. So I'm like, this dude ain't playing. And I said, there's no way. I don't have a warrant out for that. You know, I've never had that problem. And he's like, I don't know. You'll have to tell the judge. That's exactly what he told me. And I'm thinking he's talking about the judge that I just got this bail from. No, he was talking about a different judge. So he said, so I said, well, what do I do? I just bailed out. And he said, you ain't going nowhere. We're waiting on the sheriff's department to get here, and they're going to transport you to East Baton Rouge Parish Prison. Holy smokes. And for y'all that don't know East Baton Rouge Parish Prison, there's two notorious, I would say really notorious prisons in Louisiana at that time. And it was Orleans Parish Prison and East Baton Rouge Parish Prison. You didn't want to be locked up in either of them, especially when you didn't do it. So I am just in utter shock. I didn't say another word. I just kind of looked at the guy, and they put me back in they took my personal property back, put me back in the little holding cell thing. And then here comes the sheriff department. They tell me, come on. I leave. The sheriff's department takes custody of me, and off I go to East Baton Rouge Parish Prison. I get there, and East Baton Rouge Parish Prison is across from the airport. And so we turn down that street, and you're seeing the airport, and you're seeing people flying, and they're leaving, and they're going to Hawaii or going to Alaska or wherever it is. They're going on vacation, and here's Jim Chapman, and he's going to prison. And I couldn't believe it. I'm 18 years old. I ain't never been in prison. I ain't never been in jail. So they bring me and book me into parish prison. Now, mind you, I didn't do this, okay? I don't know what to do. I'm only 18. Think back to when you were 18 and how dumb we all were at that time, or most of us. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know the process, any of that. So they bring me in, and there's a Sally Port area there. And that's where you take your belt off, you take your rings off, your watch, whatever you got, you put it in a envelope, and they seal the envelope, and you write the contents on the outside of that envelope, or they write the contents as you're handing it over, and then you sign it. And that's to say, whenever you get out of there, that you got all your property back. So I do that. They don't give me the orange jumpsuit thing. I'm thinking it's time to put on the orange jumpsuit, but they don't give me that at that time. I'm in the clothes I was in, and they bring me to another area. And this is like a holding area, just like you'd imagine or you've seen on TV. It's 4 or 5 cells, maybe even more than that. And there is a little control center in the dead center of this room, a control area. And there was like 3 correctional officers inside of that. It's surrounded by glass, and they're looking at cameras and stuff, it looked like. So they bring me in there, and man, there's like 4 cells that are empty, and there's 1 cell that's just full of people. And I'm thinking, okay, they're going to put me in a cell by myself. No, they stick me in the cell with 19 other dudes, right? So I go in there, and look, when I was 18, y'all, I was built like a brick shit house. I was 195 pounds, 6 feet tall, and not probably an ounce of body fat. All I did was work out and eat. That's all I did at that time, and chase women. I didn't have like a sensation of fear. I was actually stupid during that time and felt bulletproof. And so I didn't go into that cell freaking out scared for my life or anything. I went in that cell, and I'm thinking ain't nobody going to mess with me, and I'm not going to mess with them, and it's all going to be good. And for the most part in that cell, nobody messed with me. Everybody kind of minded their own business. They had a lot of guys, and they were sitting around shooting the shit. And I'll never forget, they had a guy come in right after me. I had been in that cell maybe 5 minutes. I'm sitting on a little bench in a corner, and he walks in and he smiles, and he has an entire mouth of gold teeth, an entire mouth. And it blew my mind. I mean, every tooth. He had 50 teeth and they were all gold. And what stuck out to me to that guy was he was talking. Apparently they all knew each other in this cell. And he was talking to the other guys in this cell, and he used the term, man, the cops come and got me. And I think it was a drug charge he was down for. And, they found the drugs on me or whatever. And I knew I was stuck like Chuck. And the second he said that, I'm like, that is the coolest saying I've ever heard in my life. Stuck like Chuck. That was the first time I ever heard that. It might have been the first time it's ever been said. I don't know. But it caught on years later because everybody was saying it. That stuck out to me for some reason. It gave me a little bit of laughter in what was a, pretty crazy situation at that time. So I sit there forever. And eventually they don't let it. There's so many people inside of this holding cell with me that they don't let anybody else in. They start filling up the other cells. It's crazy. And eventually, this seemed like hours later, might've been 5-6 hours later. They say my name. I come to the front of the cell. Everybody moves out the way. And incidentally, for about the last 2 hours I was in that cell, I had to piss like you would not believe. And there was no way. There was a toilet in the corner of that cell, but it's just a wide open toilet. And I had to piss so bad, and there was no way I was going to piss with what at that time was probably 25 other dudes in that cell. I was like, fuck that. So I was practically dancing in that cell. So eventually they come up to the cell. They say my name. I go to the front. And they said, you got to go to the back. And I'm like, oh, shit. Here we go. I'm going in G-pop. But I didn't even know it was called G-pop back then. I just knew I was going to another area where it probably wasn't going to be good. They bring me, the CO brings me down this long hall. But instead of going to what I was thinking was this, what you would see on TV, right? This tiered area. I go to this office. There's a girl in there, and she's probably, I don't know, maybe 25, 26, very pretty. And I go in there and I sit down, and she says, so what's your charge? And I tell her, and I start going through the whole story. I don't know what the fuck they're talking about. I've never stolen anything in my life. And they're saying felony theft. And she says, look, there ain't nothing I can do about that. You got to see a judge, and you got to tell him that. All you're here for today is for me to figure out what you did, etc. Now, I didn't know at that time that this was a classifications officer. And of course, Kelly Jennings, Unspeakable with Kelly Jennings, she was a classifications officer in Angola. So that's what she did. But at this time, at 18, I had no idea. I thought this lady was just trying to talk to me. And it's funny when you're 18, I distinctly remember this. When you're 18, you know, and you got a pretty girl and she's just a little bit older than you in front of you, you're going to show out as much as possible. So she started asking me questions. Like she would ask me, you know, are you someone that fights a lot and stuff like that? And I'm showing out in front of this girl. So I'm like, hell yeah, I'll throw down the heartbeat. You know, there's no way I'm going to tell her anything but that, right? I'm trying to impress this. I'm sitting here trying to get a date in prison, y'all. It's crazy. So she's asking me all these questions. She says, you know, would you consider yourself someone that would start trouble? And I'm like, I wouldn't start it, but I'd finish it, you know, shit like that. And she says, okay. And she said, she writes whatever she writes. She hands it to the CO who was standing kind of in the corner the whole time. And she says, good luck. And I'm like, man, oh shit, where am I going now? And what's your phone number? No, I didn't say that last part. So I get up, off I go again. And the CO's like, okay, you know, I ain't gonna lie. She's got you in a tough tier. You be careful. Hey, y'all, Podcasting about Louisiana's most notorious prison takes a ton of energy, and feeding my body and my brain with farm fresh, never frozen ingredients is as important to my process in podcasting as telling the story itself. That's why I choose HelloFresh. We all know home-cooked meals are so much better for you, but you don't always have time to pull it off. But with HelloFresh handling all the meal planning, shopping, and most of the prep, it's easier than ever to get dinner on the table quick and painless. No more endless recipe searching or spending money on whole jars of spices for only a pinch. With HelloFresh, everything you need to make delicious meals comes right to your door, pre-portioned and fresh. Plus, the included step-by-step recipe cards make cooking simple. I love opening that box and everything I need is right there inside. I eat healthier, save time, and actually enjoy cooking dinner because HelloFresh makes it so easy. I tried out the bruschetta chicken last week and was blown away by the taste. I mean, flavor-filled. You gotta try it. For free breakfast for life, go to HelloFresh.com/free bloody Angola. One free breakfast item per box while subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life just by going to HelloFresh.com/free bloody Angola. HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit.
The Labor Day weekend sale is on at Tanger Outlets. Score up to 70% off at top brands like Nike Factory Store, Crocs, J. Crew Factory, Gap Outlet, and so many more. Refresh your wardrobe with the latest arrivals for less from all your favorite brands this Labor Day weekend. Tanger Outlets, always on trend, always on sale. Plan your trip at Tanger.com.
And I didn't know what he meant. So he bring me to this other area, and it's, from what I can recall, it's not like a pod area that they have now. It was like a big, giant hallway with cells on one side of it, and the hallway area was very wide, and it had like some tables and stuff like that. There was a phone on the wall that's going to play a big part in this story. So they bring me to this area, and they let me in, and everybody's, they're sizing me up, right? All these other convicts. I don't know if you call them convicts because this was parish prison. It's not Angola. But all these other guys in there, they're sizing me up. I'm sizing them up, making sure I look everyone in the eyes. Because like I said, I was stupid back then and thought I could whip anybody's ass if I had a problem. And so I didn't have a fear. I didn't have a fear that anyone was going to want to throw hands with me or anything like that. So I get in there and I see the phone, and I haven't used the phone. Nobody knows I'm here except for my friend that tried to bail me out the courthouse jail that I was in. I'm sure he knew, but I didn't get a chance to talk to him. I'm thinking I got to use the phone. Well, there was a guy at that time. He was on the phone. He's talking. I don't know. I kind of walked by him 3 or 4 times because I'm trying to hint to this guy that I want the phone, right? And he ain't having none of that. He ain't getting off the phone. It sounded like he was hollering at some girl, and he's talking, lovey-dovey to her and stuff like that. And I'm getting frustrated because I want to use the phone. And so I go and I kind of stand like right behind him, and he literally turned around. He looks at me kind of crazy. Then he turns back around, and I'm like, okay, now he knows I want to use it, and I'll back off a little bit. So I went and I sat at one of them little tables they had, little benches or whatever it was. He gets off the phone eventually, and I get on the phone, and I call my girlfriend at the time. Now, my parents were out of town. They were in Florida, and it was before cell phones, y'all. I don't think they had a cell phone, if I recall, and I had no idea where they were staying. So I really didn't have anybody to call but my girlfriend at that time. And I'm thinking, that she can call my sister or something, or somebody to get me out of here. So I call, and I tell her to put out an APB. I'm in parish prison. I ain't got a lot of time to talk or whatever. And I'm in the middle of having this conversation with her. And this other guy walks up to the phone. And who knew they had sticky notes in jail? But from what I recall, he had something that he could stick on the actual phone box. It was like a payphone, but it didn't accept quarters. You had to make collect calls. And it was kind of funny because as I was talking to my girlfriend, there was this voice that would come over the phone and it would say, from the East Baton Rouge Parish Prison. It was very professional sounding, and it would do it like every 30 seconds. So this guy takes whatever it was that he stuck to the box of that phone, and it said, hang up. That's all it said. And I turned around and I looked right at that guy and I said, I'll hang up when I'm done. I was dumb back then, y'all. Trust me. So I turned back around. I turned my back to him. I wasn't worried about that fool. And I'm talking to my girl again, and I'm saying, put out the APB, right? Well, about 3 to 4 minutes after that, everything goes haywire. 4 COs come in there. I think it was 4, may have been more than that. And they said, everybody hit the ground. And that's what we did. We all grabbed concrete. They walked straight up to me, and I'm still on the phone. They grabbed the phone out of my hand, hanging up. And I'm like, that's my girl. And they said, get up and come with us. Pull me up. They walked back out of that area, shut the cell, the main door to those cells. And they said, dude, you were about to get killed in there. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, one of the main guy was talking to me. He said, what did you say to those guys? And I said, he wanted to use a phone. I told him he could use it after I was done. And he said, what you didn't see is behind you, they had about 10 of them that were about to jump you, and they probably would have killed you. I had no idea where I was at acting a fool, right? So they bring me back to this classifications officer, except it's a different person now. It's a guy. And he sits me down and he's like, I heard you had a little trouble. And he said, I think we might have had you in the wrong area. So he puts me in this other area. And I don't know what area this was as far as how they classified it, but I know it was very chill. And he says, you'll be fine in here. This is mainly guys that are in there because they were caught with weed, stuff like that. So the CO brings me to this other area. And I walk in there, and sure enough, you can just tell by the people in there, it's a lot more chill. Man, as soon as I walk in there, and the tier kind of looked the same, except for it wasn't as wide. The hall, the area where you would mingle and stuff was not as wide as that first area I was in. It was a lot more narrow. And there were, I don't know, probably about 30 people in that one. And then they had cells. And look, one thing, I'm going to digress on this. Before I went even to the first unit where it was probably the worst of the worst in that prison, after I saw that classifications officer, they gave me that. I went to another area and I actually changed into the orange jumpsuit and everything. And they gave me a bean bag. And I'll never forget this. First of all, your bean bag, it's not like a bean bag that you have, in an apartment when you're 18 years old, and they're very light, and it's just something you plop down on to play your PlayStation or whatever. This is a bean bag that is as long as like a mattress, and they're heavy as shit. And look, wherever they classified me originally was like on the other side of the prison. They hand me this bean bag that weighs like 80 pounds, and I had to carry that son of a bitch all the way to the other side of the prison while this, and look, the CO wasn't carrying it, right? So I had these freaking, they were like foam flip-flops and this giant beanbag and my orange jumpsuit. And I'm thinking, holy shit, man, I have come a long way in life, right? But that beanbag stuck out to me, still sticks out to me today because it weighed so much. So I'll get back to the story. I'm in that more chill, I guess you could say, unit. And as soon as I walk in, I'm dragging my beanbag, and I don't remember if they told me what cell was going to be my cell, or if I just picked it. But I went in this cell, and it was a 2-man cell. And there was a guy on the bottom bunk, and he was a tough looking dude. And he said, you get in the top bunk. And I'm like, that's cool. I wanted the top bunk actually, because honestly, I did have enough brains to assume and figure that if I had the top bunk, it would be a little bit harder to shank me. Right. So I take my bean bag, and I'm freaking struggling to get this thing. Even, I was strong as shit back then, but these things were heavy, and I flop it up on that top bunk and lay it out. And it only covers like half of this bunk. And I remember the dude told me, just let it sit a little while. It'll straighten out. It'll cover the whole length of the bunk. And I'm like, cool. So I go out of the cell, and as soon as I do, there's these 2 white guys, and so skinny they could hula hoop through a Cheerio, right? And they want to friend me up right from the start. I mean, it was like, hey man, what are you in for? And they were very nice, but almost like a little bit too eager to be my friend, and kind of put my radar up a little bit. I'm like, what are these dudes trying to friend me up for? But they were cool. They were in there. Both of them were in there for drug charges of some sort. They got caught with something. And so I tell them what I'm in for. And they're on these aren't people in life that at that time that I would have been friends with. They didn't have the same interest I did. I was, as I am now, I was very into football and sports and things like that. These guys were kind of like, I guess you could say, a headbanger type. But they were really cool, really nice. And at that time, I didn't know anybody. So I'm in that prison and didn't know a soul. And I was more than happy to make a couple friends, right? So we're sitting around, we're talking. I'm telling them, I'm in here for something I didn't do. And, oh, yeah, right. They all say that. And I'm like, no, really, I didn't fucking do this. And I still have no idea what's going on. So I tell them the scenario, and they're like, well, you ain't going to see a judge. I'm thinking I'm getting out of there that night. And they said, you're not going to be able to get out of here until Monday. Because this was a Friday, incidentally, when all this went down. And the judges don't, at least at that time, they didn't see people on weekends. So if you went to parish prison on a Friday, you weren't getting out until Monday. I didn't know that until they told me that. And I'm like, holy shit. So during this conversation, I tell them that, I was in another unit and they moved me out. I told them kind of the whole story. And they said, dude, you better watch your back. And I'm like, well, I'm not even in that area now. And they're like, yeah, but you got to go eat. Now I hadn't ate since I had them 2 cheeseburgers. So I was hungry as it was. And this was late. It was like 10 o'clock at night or something. They had already ate dinner. I missed that. I think I was in the holding cell during that time. And so they said, in the morning, it's going to be breakfast time. But if you go eat, they're going to go after you. I can promise you. And I'm like, fuck, man. So I got to sleep that night. No problems. Nothing interesting to tell you. Next day I wake up. And one thing I'll say about my experience in there was it was loud all the time, except for like sleep time. Like it did quiet down a little during that time. But I remember when those lights were on and everybody was up and moving about, it was so loud all the time. I mean, it was just talking all the fucking time. It was crazy. So I wake up the next morning and everybody's going to eat breakfast. And I'm like, fuck that. I'm not going, and I'm starving by this point. I'm not going to eat breakfast. So them dudes, they come out of their cell in the morning and everybody's in line. And I'm in line at this time, and you line up and then they tell you go, and they've got these COs, and I guess they're just watching you, making sure you go where you're supposed to go. And I said, do I have to go? And they're like, no, you can stay here. But they said, it's going to be like an hour or something like that before we come back. And you'll get locked in here, basically. And I'm like, fuck, I don't care. So I step out of line. And I said, do I have to tell anybody? And they're like, no, just step out of line. Everybody's going to walk out and they'll leave you in here and lock you in. Okay. So that's what happened. Everybody walked out. They locked the thing. It was the first time that I remember when I was in there that it was quiet. And that part I liked. But I was freaking starving. And I was not going to eat and put myself in a position where I was going to either end up in a hole somewhere because I got in a fight with 10 people or get killed, right? So they leave and they come back an hour or so later. And another thing about being in there, I imagine being in any prison, at least for me, I didn't know what day or what time it was ever. It ain't like they got a clock on the wall. It ain't like you're walking around with a watch. I guess I could have asked a CEO or something what time it was or what day it was for that matter. But I remember like your whole equilibrium is off because you don't see the sun. It's not like in the movies, at least in that prison. There's no windows to the outside. I mean, you're inside of a inside of a building. So very strange. I didn't know what day it was and all that sort of thing. So they come back, and it wasn't probably 10 minutes after that. The CO walks in there, one of the COs, and he says, Chapman. And I I go up to him and he says, you're released. I'm like, what? You're released. Get your shit. Man, I said, what shit? He said, your beanbag. So I go get my beanbag. I yanked that thing, and it was lighter than it ever felt. And they walked me out. I walked through the prison, down all these corridors and stuff, and I end up in another area, and they give me my stuff. And this is where it gets crazy, y'all. Listen to this. Come to find out, this whole time I was in there for mistaken identity, and somehow they figured it out in the process of me going to see the judge. They caught it. So I was scheduled to go see a judge on that Monday to get bail. Like they would name a bail to bail me out of this charge. And during the process, I guess, of lining me up to see that judge, someone somewhere figured out this ain't the same James Chapman. They had me mixed up with another James Chapman. This is what they told me. Another James Chapman from the same city, Baton Rouge, with a driver's license number that was one digit different. No shit. And somehow when this guy got charged with felony theft, they keyed it one number off, which was my driver's license number, which had the same name. How about that? So I get the hell out of there. I called one of my friends at that time that was able to come pick me up. And that was it. That was it. And I told people, of course, I've told many people this story since that day. And they're all like, you didn't sue the shit out of everybody for that? And I'm like, no, I was 18 years old. Okay. I was just happy to get the hell out of there. And I didn't know you could sue somebody for that. I was happy to get out of there. I'm like, and I remember the guy told me, whoever explained that to me, I can't even remember who exactly it was now. He like told me they were sorry. And he's like, man, I'm sorry. I know this sucks. And that was it. That was it. But that was the story of mistaken identity. And it happened to me at 18. So it can happen. I don't know that would happen these days because they have so much more in the way of technology now to avoid that mistake. Back then, they had computers and stuff like that, but they were like shitty computers. I mean, they're nothing compared to what you have now. Now, I don't see that mistake happening. But back then, sure happened to me. True freaking story. So I wanted to bring you that. I thought you'd find that interesting. And I've never told that story on a podcast before. But since this is a prison podcast and that is a prison story, I thought you'd get a kick out of it. So thank you for listening. I want to thank all our Patreon members. If you can't be a Patreon member, Woody and I get that. No big deal. Share the show if you could. Check out everything else we do. Real Life, Real Crime Original with Woody Overton, of course, the best show on earth when it comes to solo podcasting on true crime. You can check out my podcast, Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite, where I talk about the elite in society and all the crazy shit that they do. I've talked about Matthew Perry's case. Primarily mine that I cover on that show are adjudicated cases, so they've already been through the court system and everything. But there are a few that have not. I've talked about P. Diddy on like 6 episodes because every time I turn around, he's doing something else stupid. Check that out if you're so inclined. And also check out Real Life, Real Crime Daily with Woody and myself, where we talk about the crime news headlines from all over the country. And it is a commentary podcast where we talk back and forth and give our opinions on each of these cases that we cover on the show. So thank you so much for your support. Until next time, I'm Jim Chapman for Woody Overton. We're your host of Bloody Angola, a podcast 142 years in the making, the complete story of America's bloodiest prison. Peace.
I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hill String Gang or Angola 3. Die inside these walls, inside the wire. And when the wolf cries, I know it's over. Oh, bloody Angola. Oh, bloody Angola.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. What are your self-care non-negotiables? It's hard to make time for the things that keep you healthy, but being consistent with self-care is like working a muscle. And when life gets crazy, that muscle keeps you strong. Therapy is the ultimate self-care, and BetterHelp makes it easy to get started with affordable online sessions you can do from anywhere. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp, HELP.com today to get 10% off your first month.
The Labor Day weekend sale is on at Tanger Outlets. Score up to 70% off at top brands like Nike Factory Store, Crocs, J. Crew Factory, Gap Outlet, and so many more. Refresh your wardrobe with the latest arrivals for less from all your favorite brands this Labor Day weekend. Tanger Outlets, always on trend, always on sale. Plan your trip at Tanger.com.